Welcome to What Do You Know with Tayloe. I'm Tayloe Clements. Today we'll be discussing sexism in pulp culture with our three guests, Jake Muma from Centerville, Ben Blumenthal from McLean, and Michael Margulis from Ashburn. These three are experts on the subject, and we hope this program can help shed some light on such a controversial topic. With attempts to erase sexism in pop culture, would you say there is still an adequate amount of sexism when it pertains to women in the media? Why do you think this is, and can you give examples?
Well, yeah, I definitely think there still is sexism in the media and pop culture. If you look at pop culture, you look at musicians and actresses who go on the red carpets to they're nominated or to receive awards for their art, but they're still being asked about their clothes, their hair, instead of like what they actually did, what they accomplished.
I agree with Jake, and furthermore, when these actresses and stars are asked about their makeup or their attire, and they get offended by it, then they're criticized even more for getting offended by these questions. They're called super feminists or other things of that nature.
Yeah, and I think Jake pointed out in music, these musicians, these female musicians go on talk shows and they get asked about their love life and is that what their music is based off of, particularly Taylor Swift. And she came out and she said something along the lines that guys like male artists like Bruno Mars and Ed Sheeran do the same thing, and they talk about their life and their love life, and they don't hear any backlash or criticism. But when Taylor Swift does the same thing, it's kind of a double standard there.
Interesting. And Ben, do you think women are becoming more and more aware of this trend, and because of that, do you think that it's inspiring women to become more independent?
I think so. I mean, you see all the time in the media, women will either refuse to answer these questions or they'll call out the reporters specifically. And I think it is inspiring women because it seems to be a growing trend of fighting back against that sexism.
Yeah, a lot of the times, I mean, I know that I was recently looking at an article in BuzzFeed, another like pop culture avenue. They like to post articles on about sexism and issues like that. And they were talking about, they had all these pictures with what they said at like the red carpet events and things. And it really does seem like women are stepping up. I know there's an example of Jennifer Lawrence being like, someone asked her about her dress and she was like, yeah, there's a top and a bottom, not, oh, it's this designer. And they're really kind of, stepping up and saying, I don't have to be labeled by who I am by what I wear or, how pretty I am. Like, that's not what matters. What matters is, the topics in the world, the news, and what's really at hand, the movie I just made. What was the message in that? Not, oh, how pretty do I look? But Jake, what do you think on that?
Well, I definitely agree that sexism is very widely recognized by women, and you can even see it in the news media field. Like a lot of anchors, a lot of reporters, they're mostly male. And I could point to an instance in particular on the Sean Hannity show, where one of the female panelists was questioning Hannity's sources and everything, and he and another male panelist proceeded to like attack her and kind of barrage her with insults because she was a woman. She didn't have the credibility that they had.
Obama signed the petition, Tamara, to call for the resignation of the chief law enforcement officer of this nation because he lied on her oath when he criminalized journalism, and he did it, but you refuse to do what's right.
But I really hope that when you speak to a judge, you don't point your finger in the person's face the entire time by making your point.
Are you a judge?
Your finger does not.
Whose finger's in my face right now?
Mine, because I'm telling you to shut up.
But anyway. And it was really outrageous, some of the remarks that the panelist was saying to this woman. He was saying things along the lines of know your place and shut your mouth and things like that, and it was just very disrespectful, and it took me aback a little bit because that was the first time I had seen anything like that. So it was very strange to me.
Do you guys idolize any, women that you've seen in the media that have overcome this sexism or really stood up? Do you see any of those as being those independent women?
For me, Jennifer Lawrence is probably a big one, and then Amy Schumer as well are probably the two that I see the most speaking out against sexism. And I think they're doing a really good job, and I think they're really bringing this issue to light. And I think if they continue to do what they're doing now, I think we'll see some change in the near future.
Yeah, that's a great example. And unfortunately, we have to go to commercial break, but we'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Let's get right into discussion. Do you think that there is more sexism involving men than women in pop culture?
Well, I wouldn't say there's more. There's definitely less, but and it's a lot less or a lot more subtle than it is with men. Because with women, it's like we said earlier, ask about the dresses, everything like that. But with men, it's a lot more subtle things like advertisements. Like for example, like Axe body spray. You see really muscular guys getting all the girls because they're using the spray. That really appeals to a younger male generation. He was like, oh, if I get like really in shape and I use this spray, I'll get girls, which is kind of what they're aiming at.
And I think that creates an image where it's very unrealistic for boys, especially in our generation, because they create this hyper masculine sort of macho man figure where it's very hard to obtain, and people and boys of our generation, they'll get discouraged and they'll start feeling bad about themselves, and that's not what they want, and that's not what we want as a society.
Yeah, and while that, is so, that is something that really does affect the development of kids and even of men, I think that a lot of times women in pop culture, I think that the topics really get, highlighted in the news and in the media about, how this is going on just based off American history and how, women had, the right to vote like a little bit later on, and, how they had to fight for that. And I think that is why it gets so highlighted in the media now, because it is an issue and it's still, coming up, whether it's in Disney or whatever it is. Do you think that is true? Do you think it's still like very prevalent for men, or even more damaging, for which gender?
I don't think it is. I don't think it's more damaging for men per se, because like Jake was saying, it is very subtle and it kind of stays out of the spotlight. We see much more sexism discussion about women and the ideal body image and things like that. So I think it's subtle, like Jake was saying, is pretty much the point.
I would have to disagree with you, Michael. I saw a study recently that they looked at how sexism towards men can actually have a serious impact on men's, financial standing in their wallet, because traditional beliefs and even in the media show that, men are expected to provide for the woman, as far as, even down to buying drinks at the bar. It's just kind of how our culture is. And so that it can have a damaging impact on men financially.
Yeah.
Going off of what Ben said, I know there was a study done that a lot of commercials that depict like the main person in the commercial is men is usually has to do with like a business advertisement, buying a car or something like that. Whereas if the main focus in the commercial is women, it might usually be like household items and a lot more like less serious decision purchases, which kind of perpetuates the whole gender norms thing within our society, that men are looked at or more relied on to take care of like bigger business situations and decisions like that for the family, whereas the woman like is seen as just to provide for like general basic things.
Yeah, and Ben, I know that you've done a lot of research on this. Do you think of some examples in pop culture has been like sexism towards men specifically?
Definitely in movies and television, from what I've seen. I mean, you kind of already mentioned the Axe body spray, but also in movies, men are kind of just like women are painted in kind of a sexual way, or how they're supposed to be. Movies do the same thing towards men. Oftentimes they're seen as dumb or poor hygiene. Like take for example the movie Dude, Where's My Car, or Dumb and Dumber. That kind of paints the typical male in not such a good light.
And noticing this trend, what do you think? What are your opinions?
Well,
on that?
going off of what Ben was saying about kind of painting the male light, and I was speaking about the hypersexualized, hypermasculine man, and what comes to mind for me is James Bond. So James Bond is a figure that is kind of a womanizer. He kind of goes about his business. He does his thing, and and people and kids look up to that. They want to be James Bond. They want to be that kind of figure, and it's kind of a mix of both from what I'm saying and what Ben is saying, and also what Jake brought up.
Well, unfortunately, we have to go to commercial break, but we'll be right back after this message. Welcome back, and thanks for staying tuned. Taking a bit of a turn, Michael, I know that you've studied this topic. Do you think movies, they teach gender roles?
Definitely growing up, I think they do. We talk about Disney movies a lot when we're looking at how kids are brought up and the roles they're taught. We look at the Disney princesses, and we look at the heroes such as Hercules and things along that lines. And I think that really develops a beginning sense of what a girl and a boy are supposed to mean for children.
How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I was watching a TED Talk recently that discussed how children's movies can have a huge impact on young boys and how they're supposed to act. And, you know, it kind of teaches movies like Shrek or Star Wars, it kind of teaches, you know, you as a male are supposed to, you know, defeat the evil or the nemesis through violence, and then you collect your prize, which typically is a woman in these movies.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of times now with more recent Disney movies. Before they had, you know, the women like Cinderella and Beauty and the Beast, and Mulan kind of started breaking that a little bit in a different direction. But I noticed that like Tangled and the new ones that are coming out now have the women are starting to get like smaller proportions. I was reading an article about that and how, you know, their eyes are getting bigger and their hands are getting smaller. And although they are like being more independent and like more strong women lead roles, you know, conquering and fighting bad guys, there's still that prince that has the huge hands and is like, you know, comes around and is more of a protecting figure. I don't know if that makes a huge difference. It's definitely turning for the better, but I still see that gender role in modern, you know, movies.
Yeah, well, I mean, staying with Disney, I know Mulan kind of started it, and a lot with the newer Disney movies like Brave and things like that. They have given the lead female character a lot like more prominent role and kind of defied normal gender roles in these movies. Like Mulan, for example, you know, she goes out into war, she joins the army, fights a bunch of people, which is not something that is seen as something that like, a woman would do. And you look at like movies now, something like Hunger Games is completely off the tracks to something different. You know, a strong lead female character that they built a whole trilogy of movies around, a whole book series around, which is something that really hasn't happened a lot.
Yeah. So, Jake, until recently, Disney has played a huge role in defining these gender roles. Do you think that this, you know, plays a part in any sexism that's coming up now in the media and this issue?
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, Disney is probably the biggest children's entertainment company there is, and you know, when you're a child, you're definitely watching Disney movies. You're watching old ones, new ones, everything. So they can really imprint that gender role norm onto these children who are going to grow up thinking, oh, you know, I'm a guy, I have to be a big, strong, muscular guy and like rescue the princess or whatever it is. You know?
Yeah.
Especially because at that young age is typically when you're the most impressionable.
And Michael, on this topic, do you think this trend could be reversed?
I think it can. I think we're seeing it move towards kind of being reversed. Jake mentioned Mulan. You see Brave. You see even Frozen with the two main female characters. I think we're moving towards that area, but I still think we're a long way away from actually completely reversing the trend, because we've had these gender norms and these gender roles for decades and decades, and it's going to take a long time to overcome those. But I think in time we'll be able to get to a place where it's equal.
I do think that we are moving in that direction, but I think it's still going to take some time. You know, one kind of scary statistic in 2011 of the top 100 movies that, you know, came out that year, I believe it was something like 11 of them, only 11 showed females as, you know, the main protagonist positive role, which is a lot smaller than I would have expected.
Yeah, on that, I found a similar statistic about women in science and in like as doctors and chemists, and it was a lot less percentage than how it is actually in real life that was portrayed in movies. It was something like 11%, where in reality, in real life, it's like, you know, closer to 78 that are those clinical scientists that are in, you know, the labs and such.
I definitely think, you know, recent movies and things, we're definitely stepping away from the sexism and kind of trying to broaden gender roles, but it's still a long time coming.
This has been a great discussion. I thank you guys so much for your honest answers and your insight. Thanks for watching. This is What Do You Know with Tayloe. We'll see you next time.